Okay, it's 4:30 on a Sunday afternoon fast, so if you're here, you're really dedicated, so I thank you for coming. Either that or you have nothing better to do. Hopefully it's more the first than the second. Today's topic, sorry, I got to keep this a little bit away from my mouth so I don't speak too loudly into it. Today's topic, as is printed right behind me, is an interesting one. We're going to have a discussion about the topic of mourning, not that time of day, but mourning as spelled above, in the thought of Rabbi Joseph Soloveitchik, one of the great thinkers of the previous century. I'm going to begin by saying, of course, you know that there are limits on the studying of Torah on Tish'a BeAb. As we're going to talk about over the course of the class, the laws of mourning apply, and someone who is in mourning, someone who is an avel, is not allowed to study Torah. The reason being, anyone? Why is an avel not allowed to study Torah? I'm sorry, louder. Right? It brings joy, right? And Torah brings joy, and that's a feeling that's inappropriate or not right for an avel. So therefore, we don't study Torah when we're avel. So too, this time of year where we're practicing the concepts of avelut, so too we're not allowed. So therefore, the things that are normally expected from a Torah class are not allowed on Tish'a BeAb, which is interesting. It's pretty amazing that we're able to have a day full of a whole slate of classes where no one is doing what we're allowed to be doing. And it's not only going on here, it goes on around the world. It's pretty impressive. It's pretty special. Anyway, so it makes it very difficult for us presenters to come up with something. We'd much rather talk about the parasha or Pirkei Avot or some interesting midrash, but no, we have to talk about something that's a downer. So pardon me if I upset you as we go along. The topic that I've decided to talk about is something that I've been thinking about over the course of the year, and that is the influence and the thought of Rabbi Soloveitchik. Rabbi Soloveitchik's name is one that's pretty powerful, it's pretty meaningful. I'd be surprised if there's anyone in the room who's not heard of Rabbi Soloveitchik. But as the years pass, and it's a little over 30 years since his passing, it's easy to see the possibility for us to not fully appreciate his influence. And Rabbi Soloveitchik's influence was very, very large. He was a defining and direction-setting figure of the 20th century of the Jewish community, but maybe even more. In ways similar to Rabbi Aaron Kotler, Rabbi Moshe Feinstein, the Lubavitcher Rebbe in Crown Heights, and perhaps the Hazon Ish and Rabbi Ovadia Yosef in Israel, both his teachings and his personality created an important segment in the Jewish community. What we call modern orthodoxy, and more than modern orthodoxy, because many of its many variants, spin-offs, and so on, owe their existence and their nature and style to him. I did not personally learn with him, although I lived during his lifetime, but a great many of my teachers did. And what I could tell you, having more than 20 teachers who have learned directly with him, is that each one of them was profoundly impacted, and that virtually any person that I've ever spoken to that spent any time in his shiur, in his lessons that he delivered at Yeshiva University, or even that lived in Boston during the time that he was there, would forever call him the Rav, which means the rabbi, but more affectionately than that and more reverently than that, they considered him the rabbi, the one who they followed, the one whose decisions they would go no matter what, exclusive to anybody else. And it's pretty interesting that a person can have that influence in 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, a semester, or something like that, but Rabbi Soloveitchik certainly did. What's particularly interesting to me as I spent time studying him this year is how his style is so vastly different than what is sought after today. Contemporary education seeks teachers who will reach down and meet students at their level, connect with them, show warmth, caring. Terms like differentiation are used all the time. These are all nice and wonderful things that we do today, but they're not Rabbi Soloveitchik. Rabbi Soloveitchik was an overpowering and towering figure. To use the word intimidating is not an overstatement at all, both because of his knowledge and sharpness of his personality. Rather than reach down to his students, students in Rabbi Soloveitchik's lessons were expected to try and reach up and experience him. Can you imagine today 4-hour lectures, right? Today they gave me 40 minutes, right? Can you imagine that people would go to a class that would last 4 or 4.5 hours? Has anyone ever heard of anything like that? But they did it every year with Rabbi Soloveitchik. He would give a very famous Tish'a BeAb lecture in Yeshiva University, and the hall, which is bigger than this room, was packed out into the hallways, and people sat there on his every word. Not in our generation. Fear of being called upon. Right? I can't, as someone who manages teachers, if a parent calls me and says, the teacher, my students are afraid of the teacher, people expect that the teacher has to go. But in Rabbi Soloveitchik's class, it was very well known that it was a very scary experience to be one that was called upon to read. There's a famous story, which I've heard firsthand, of someone who was in the class, and the room was a big room like this, and Rabbi Soloveitchik decided, who am I going to call on to read today? And he looks down the list and he says, sit, right? And he doesn't know sit, and sit says, he doesn't want to read, so he says, oh, he's not here today. So he goes, okay, good, you read, there are a number of stories. There were days where there were pillars in the classroom, and the students used to sit in rows behind the pillars so they not get called upon because they were afraid, because the rabbi took learning very, very seriously. And again, these are today things that would be unacceptable, but it's pretty interesting that Rabbi Soloveitchik was able to create a generation of great teachers, of great Jews, of great educators, probably more than anyone alive today. Just some of the people that I know like Rabbi Raymond Harari, Rabbi Labaton, Rabbi Sachs, there's so many others, Joel Walowalski, Rabbi Riskin, Chaim Braventer, and on and on and on. The list of people that Rabbi Soloveitchik impacted, Norman Lamb, it's unbelievable. Moving into our topic, Rabbi Soloveitchik was an expert on a wide array of topics, but he undoubtedly focused on some more than others, some important areas, 2 of which we're going to touch on today, Avelut, mourning, and also Tish'a BeAb, which he would give a yearly lecture, and that was one of those 4.5-hour classes, which we're going to get to in a little bit. The rabbi's areas of expertise, which were very important for these areas of halakha, was in philosophy. He had a PhD from the University of Berlin, in psychology, and also halakha. So what we're going to look at today is the concept of mourning. Now, most of us know a little bit about mourning because of a few different reasons. Most of us experience either directly or indirectly, meaning either we've sat Shiva ourselves or we've been around people who are. And also, we have a different type of mourning, the one that we're experiencing at this time of year, where we don't do certain things. Perhaps not shaving, not learning Torah, not greeting people, and so on. So what I wanted to do was, before I moved into this, is just what are the things that you associate with mourning? So quickly, just shout it out. There's plenty of things. There's a list of more than 20 that you could probably list. So what are the things that you associate with mourning? Quickly, anyone? No shower, right? Definitely something that's part of mourning. Yeah. Clothing, tearing the clothing, very good, yes. Sitting on the floor, very good. Kaddish, very good. No music, very good. Shaving, covering mirrors. Right? A lot of stuff, keep going. You guys, you all know more than what we just said. Not being alone. Music. Leather shoes. I'm sorry, long? A certain time span, but the time span is actually very, very important. The year, the week, the 30 days, and all the stuff that goes with that. Good, yes. And also the time span, because also in the Avelut that we have, that we're doing now, 3 weeks, 9 days, week of, day of, and so on. The time period is actually a very critical part of mourning. Sometimes it's long and sometimes it's shorter, but yes. Other things, yeah. Reminiscing, reflection, yeah. The emotional pain, right? Which is, we're going to talk about whether or not that's halakha and a part of mourning, because in theory, and in reality, someone could keep avelut and not feel any pain. Right? It's possible, meaning it could be they had no connection to the person, or worse, and maybe they don't feel so much pain. So these are all definitely parts of it. What I wanted to do, and hopefully I worked this right. Let's see. Look at that. Okay, is Rabbi Soloveitchik used the area of mourning to talk about a very, very important part of the Torah in Judaism, and I'd like to read from it. This is coming out of an article called Avelut Yeshana and Avelut Chadasha. We'll talk about those terms in a little bit. Out of a book called Out of the Whirlwind, which is a summary of a lot of his lectures on the topic. He says as follows, but you can read along with me above. The whole concept of Avelut, mourning, at both an individual and a historical level, is nurtured by a unique doctrine about man and his emotional world. It actually represents, I would say, the Judaic philosophy of man and his relationship to both God and the world. And already you see, in the way Rabbi Soloveitchik approaches this topic, is that he doesn't look at Avelut as just about Avelut. It's about something much bigger. It's about the nature of Torah. It's about the nature of human beings. It's about the nature of our relationship with Hashem. And watch, he's going to explain. Man, Judaism maintains and insists, is capable of determining the kind of emotional life he wants to live. Again, I'm going to read that sentence again because that's a really important sentence. That's the key sentence. Man, Judaism maintains and insists, is capable of determining the kind of emotional life he wants to live. Man has both actions and emotions at his disposal. Man must never be overwhelmed by his emotions. He can invite emotions as well as reject them, opening the door by inviting feelings and sentiments if they are worthy, and slamming the door on those which are degrading and unworthy of attention. In the same manner in which man has the freedom to abstain from engaging in an act to which his conscience objects on moral grounds, he can also disown emotions which the same conscience assesses as unworthy of being integrated into his personality. Likewise, he can assimilate such emotions which bear the stamp of moral approval, constructive, noble feelings. Rabbi Soloveitchik used big words. Actually, this is not even big for him. What he's essentially saying here is that a big part of what Judaism believes in is that we control our inner feelings. And it's easy and obvious to see that Judaism believes and maintains that we must control our actions. We decide whether or not we'll eat or not. We'll decide whether or not we'll head this way or that way. We'll decide whether or not we'll perform melacha on Shabbat or not. All of those are things that it's obvious for a human to have the ability to decide to do, and that's a big part of what it means to be Jewish. Otherwise, the mitzvot make no sense. If you couldn't control your actions, the mitzvot have no place. But what Rabbi Soloveitchik is adding here is just as I can control my actions, my behavior, so too I can control my emotions, my psyche, my thoughts, my heart, what I believe. And that one is not so obvious and not so simple. Now the truth is, this is a question as to whether or not we could do such a thing that predates Rabbi Soloveitchik. There's a very famous piece on the Torah written by Rabbi Abraham ibn Ezra. Is anyone upstairs? If you could scroll to the bottom of the page, we'll just read the English. Thank you, beautiful, thanks. Rabbi Abraham ibn Ezra was commenting on a very famous pasuk, which we all know, Lo Tachmod, right? Thou shalt not covet, from the Ten Commandments. And this mitzvah is one that a lot of people had questions about. How could the Torah tell me what to feel in my heart? Could the Torah really command me not to want something that my friend has? I would understand if the Torah tells me don't take what my friend has that I want, but could the Torah really tell me inside what I should be feeling? So look at what he says. Thou shalt not covet. It's right over here, I got the green, so you can follow along with me, but I will read. He says as follows. Many people have wondered about this commandment. How is it that a man not covet in his heart that which is beautiful and all that which appears pleasant in his eyes? He says, I will give you, his answer is, so that's the question, his answer is very famous. He says, I will give you a parable to explain this. You should know that a villager who thinks correctly and sees that the king's daughter is beautiful will not covet her in his heart, that he should sleep with her, as he knows that this is impossible. And this villager will not think like one of the lunatics that desires that he should have wings to fly in the sky when it is not possible. This is like that which a man does not desire to sleep with his mother, even though she is beautiful, as they have accustomed him from youth to know that it is forbidden to him. So must every enlightened person know that a beautiful woman or money is not attained by a person because of his wisdom or knowledge. Rather, it is that from which God apportioned to him, and so on. And what Ibn Ezra is basically saying is that yes, you can control how you feel. If you have the proper perspective, if you teach yourself the right way, something that you may think that you would want, you could say, no, I don't want that. Most of us, as he says, don't walk around thinking, gee, I really wish I had wings to fly. Right? Why don't we think that way? Because we know it's a silly, impossible thought, and therefore we've trained ourselves to keep it far from our minds, and we don't really think that way. Right? And what he's basically saying is, that's possible with lo tachmod, of not coveting, which is a tough area, because that one is one that's very natural to us, and sometimes things that are ridiculously impossible to us, we still want. But what Rabbi Soloveitchik was doing was saying, this is not only true about coveting something, this is true about the gamut of human feelings. And that halacha has, as one of its primary goals, is to shape our feelings, to make us desire certain things that we should, to make us feel certain things that are appropriate to feel, and to make sure that we not desire certain things and that we not feel certain things that would be inappropriate. And we're going to talk about a couple of those things as we go through the concept of avelut. So, it's interesting. Avelut has different pieces to it. As Joey Shami had said before, there's different stages to it. And does anyone know what's the first stage of avelut? What's the beginning of avelut? Well, denial is not a halachic stage. So what's the first thing? Right? Onen, right? Which is called in halacha aninut. And onen is someone who, right? Anyone know? What's an onen? It's before a person is buried. In other words, someone that he is going to mourn over. And we know the mourning of close relatives, right? So someone who's going to mourn has passed, but yet that person has not been buried yet. During that stage, a person is considered an onen. And there's a particular set of halachot in regards to that. I'd like to look at that for a second. Beautiful. All right, what you have on top is a Mishnah from Masechet Berachot. And the Mishnah from Masechet Berachot reads as follows. Mi shemeto mutal lefanav. Someone who's met, a met is a deceased, a dead person. So someone whose deceased relative is laying before him. So laying before him means, and not yet buried. Patur, meaning he is not obligated, exempt. Mekriyat Shema, from saying the Shema, umina tefillah, and from praying, umina tefillin, and also from putting on tefillin, umikol mitzvot ha'amurot b'Torah, and all of the positive commandments that are in the Torah. This may be familiar to many of you. Certainly people who had the experience of being mourners may remember that during this time period, if you're going to eat food, you don't make a beracha, right? You wake up that morning and you don't put on tefillin, and so on. Many mitzvot, most of the positive mitzvot, and all of the all the mitzvot that have to do with praying and so on they're off the table. We don't do that, and it's a very interesting concept. And this only lasts for a certain period of time. The time period from when a person when the person is deceased or hears that the person was deceased until the body is buried. And the question is, why? Why should this be so? Right? Why should a person not keep the mitzvot? It seems strange. It seems strange that we would say that someone passed away, and so I don't make a bracha on food, or I don't pray to Hashem. I mean, that might be a very intense time for tefillah. But no, the Torah says, the halacha says, we don't. So we're going to look at two different opinions as to why this is so. The first is the opinion of the very famous Rashi, Rabbi Shlomo Yitzhaki. Both of these are Ashkenazic rabbis, but two of the great Talmudic commentators. And Rashi says as follows: someone who's dead, someone who's passed, has a deceased in front of him, doesn't have to say Kriyat Shema. So Rashi explains why. Lefi shehu tarud b'machshavat kiburato. Because the person is tarud. Tarud means weighed down, burdened. He's burdened with thoughts about the burial. He says, and this is very similar to the case of a chatan. A chatan is a groom that's getting married, when he's getting married, he also doesn't have to say Shema. And why? Because he's worried about thinking about the mitzvah. In the case of one who's getting married, he's thinking about getting married and taking care of all the things that need to be done. And in the case of the burial, so we're saying the person doesn't have to say these mitzvot, these brachot, make these tefillot, because they're busy burying the body. Now, a very good answer. It's Rashi after all. And it makes sense. Osek ba mitzvah, patur min ha-mitzvah. Someone who's involved in one mitzvah is patur from other mitzvot. But there's a little bit of a problem with this, and some of the people actually say this to me all the time. Unfortunately, I have to deal with these types of situations in my line of work, and very often people will say to me, Rabbi, it's all taken care of. The chevra does what they do, things are all taken care of. I'm sitting around doing nothing. Why can't I pray? I want to pray. And we say, no, you're patur, and therefore you don't. And so Rashi said to them, Osek ba-mitzvah, patur min ha-mitzvah, but the person says, but I'm not Osek ba-mitzvah, I'm not really involved in the mitzvah. So Rabbi Soloveitchik, interestingly enough, although he was very familiar with Rashi, he said, his reason for understanding Aninut was more along the lines of the Tosafot, who were quoting a Yerushalmi. And just looking down here, it says, patur min kriyat shema. It says, Yerushalmi mefaresh ta'ama. So in the Gemara Yerushalmi, it explains this answer. Amar Rabbi Bon said, Ketiv, it's written in the Torah, Leman tizkor et yom tzedecham tzayim al kol yemei chayecha. A very famous pasuk, you may know it from the Haggadah, that it says that you have to do the mitzvot and remember them and all the days of your lives. Right? All the days of your lives, you may remember that pasuk from the Haggadah. Okay. So look at what the Tosafot say, based on Yerushalmi. Yamim sha'ata osek b'chayim, velo yamim sha'ata osek b'metim. Similar, but different. Says the Tosafot that the pasuk is telling us that the only time that I am involved in doing mitzvot of any sort is if I am involved b'chayim, mekol yameh chayecha, the days of your living. Not the days of your lives, the days of your living. Velo yamim shata osek b'metim. Not the days of your death. Meaning, not the days that you're involved in matters of death. So it seems like the Tosafot is saying, if you're involved in death, and when am I involved in death? So it must be onen, when a person is burying the dead. So he says, at that time, you don't have to do the mitzvot. Rabbi Soloveitchik really wanted to expand upon this last idea. And he said as follows. He said, when we come... Rabbi Soloveitchik said that our commitment to Hashem is rooted in the awareness of human dignity and sanctity. He says, when we come face to face with death, as we do when we are on end, it makes us despair and question our very humanity. We look at the end of life and we say, what's this all worth? Most of us go through every day and we don't really think about the value of life. Most of us live our lives as if it's going to last forever, even though we know it's not the case. But when we're faced with the dead really close, when we're faced with one of our own relatives, then all of a sudden we begin to understand in a very acute way, we're not going to live forever. We grapple with death in a very real way. And that's when the Tosafot is saying, according to Rabbi Soloveitchik, that's when we're unable to do the mitzvot, because mitzvot are all about recognizing how great humans are. We are, as Rabbi Labaton would love to teach us, Tselem Elohim. We have a divine image. When we've come face to face with death, as we do when we're on Onan, we say to ourselves, what's that image worth? How am I different than one of the animals? If I'm going to have the same end as the animals, then what's happening here? Says Rabbi Soloveitchik, this is where Avelut comes in. This is where Aninut comes in. Aninut comes in to say, a person can't keep the mitzvot at this time. And therefore, the person is in the psychological state of no mitzvot, because he's coming face to face with death. And death teaches us, you can't do mitzvot. Mitzvot are not worth anything. And therefore, the halacha allows us to have that feeling for a certain period of time. Of course, it does not end there. What happens next is we move into the second stage, which we're much more familiar with, which is the stage of Avelut. And Avelut is a very different type of being. Instead of me being in a state where I can't do any mitzvot, all of a sudden, the halacha comes and tells me that I have many mitzvot. Right? All the things that we listed before. No music, no showers, can't eat certain types of food, can't say hello to people, can't learn to... All of a sudden, there are many things that I have to do. Saying Kaddish, certain periods of time. All of a sudden, the halacha descends upon me. And the halacha says that rather than completely succumbing to the situation, as Aninut allowed you to have for a few moments, the halacha commands the mourner, in the words of Rabbi Soloveitchik, to begin to pick up the debris of his own shattered personality and to re-establish himself as a man, restoring lost glory, dignity, and uniqueness. What Rabbi Soloveitchik was teaching is that the avelut that we practice, all of the customs that we have, that we all know, and anyone who's been around the house of mourning could tell you how comforted the mourners are by the practices of avelut. Not only by the visits of their friends, which certainly matter, but the halachot that they have, the kaddish that they say, sitting on the ground, tearing the clothing, these are all very meaningful practices. And the reason they're meaningful is because they strike a very deep chord. They teach us, as in the words of Rabbi Soloveitchik, that we have an opportunity to display greatness, to transcend our physical selves. Death doesn't free us from the commitment to the mitzvot, as it seems for a moment during Aninut, but rather it makes us realize the need for mitzvot and to reaffirm our commitment to Hashem and to dig in with that relationship. And it's a pretty amazing switch that we have. We go from nothing to extra and more and being committed and saying the Kaddish. It's amazing to watch people say the Kaddish for a year. As a rabbi who goes to shul every day, because I'm the rabbi of the shul, it's pretty intriguing to me to see that people that I haven't seen in a long time, all of a sudden become everyday people. And they're there every morning. And it's amazing. It's amazing to see how people won't miss a Kaddish. It's incredible. And it's interesting. Who are some of the people that won't miss Kaddish? They're people that maybe they're not keeping Shabbat as well, they don't keep kosher all the time, they're not necessarily the most religious people. They're not always the most God-connected people. But when it comes to saying the Kaddish, an amazing thing happens. Some of it has to do with just commitment to a parent or to the deceased, but it's not just that. It's more than that. Because it really strikes a deep chord in the person, in the Avel, because they realize they're making a commitment. And in fact, I would argue that what is the key moment, this is where Rabbi Soloveitchik says, what's the key moment that shifts a human being from being in onan, who's in despair, a person who's in denial, a person who can't handle the situation, a person who says, what's it all for? What changes the onan from being an onan to an avel? The person who's committed to Hashem, to doing the mitzvot, to doing that which he needs to do, it's the burial, and at the moment of burial, the saying of the Kaddish. You know, it's very interesting. Most people think that the Kaddish is a prayer that has to do with death. But if you study the words of the Kaddish, it has no concept of death in it. Kaddish is basically one thing. What is Kaddish? Anyone know? What's Kaddish all about? Praising Hashem. The glorification of Hashem's name. And basically what it's doing is saying the Kaddish when I'm switching from Onen to Avel is basically saying, Hashem, I'm at a place, I'm at the bottom. I'm at a place that's full of despair. I'm at a place that questions the very essence of what it means to be a human being. But at that moment, because I keep the halacha, because I'm a Jew, because I have my traditions, my customs, I'm part of the community that I'm part of, I praise Hashem's name. And in so doing, I turn myself from a despairing, giving up person to a committed person that could transcend physical being, that could transcend materiality. I'm about something more than myself. As I realize, says Rabbi Soloveitchik, that I'm not going to live forever, I commit to something that says, I will live on beyond more than what I can live in my years. It's a pretty amazing concept, a pretty amazing topic. Beyond the commitment to the relationship with Hashem, Avelut, says Rabbi Soloveitchik, contains a tremendous sense of Tish'a BeAb. He points out, and you may have noticed it as we said it before, many of the prohibitions during Avelut actually parallel the injunctions that we have on Yom Kippur. Who remembers? What are the things that we're not allowed to do on Yom Kippur? Eat. Eat is one of them, right? So good, eating. What are the other things we're not allowed to do on Yom Kippur? Washing, not allowed during Avelut. Leather shoes, not allowed during Avelut. We got food off the list, right? Not allowed in this Avelut that we're having now. What else? There's two others. Marital relations, not allowed during Avelut. And ointment, not allowed during Avelut. What Rabbi Soloveitchik is showing us, is that a key component of what it means to be a mourner is to, like Yom Kippur, to do Tish'a BeAb. And he explains that there's two reasons for this. There's one reason that has two parts to it, and that's because Avelut has a sense of guilt associated with it. And I wanted to talk about that sense of guilt that we have. First is the guilt that comes with the recognition that death comes as a result of sin. The Torah talks about it. Would we not sin, we would beat death. And therefore, when we face death, it brings us to the understanding that we have failed to beat it, and that's as the result of committing some kind of sin, not being perfect. And that generates tremendous feelings of guilt. But there's something even deeper that I think we all know and we all experience that is expressed really well in this story in the Gemara, which I'd like to read for you. It's about one of the great rabbis. His name is Rav. He's one of the first Amoraim, rabbis of the Gemara. And this story is about his death, so he's not in it. It says as follows, Kinach nafshe de Rav. When Rav passed away, Azlu Talmidav Batre. His students walked after him. Means they had a levaya, they had a funeral, they buried the rabbi. And I'm sure it was a very emotional day. Ki hadre, when they returned, Amre, they said, Nezel v'nechol lachma anahar danak. They said, let's go eat, let's break bread together, let's eat hamotzi on the river Danak. Batar de karche, after they ate their food, Yatve v'kame bayalahu, Hesebu dav katnan aval yashvu lo, o dilma, kevan da amre nezel v'nechol rifta v'duchta palnita ki chayzebu dame. So I don't really want to go into the halachic question because I have 3 minutes, but basically they had a question about whether or not they were supposed to say zimun and say birkat hamazon. Lo hava bidaihu, and they didn't have the answer in their hands. They didn't know the answer to the question. Kam Rav Ada bar Ahava. Rav Ada bar Ahava, one of the students, Hadar kar'el achore v'kara kriya acharina. He went and he turned his clothing around and he tore it again. It was already torn because he tore it kriya over his rabbi before. Amar nach nafshe de Rav. Rav passed away. Birkat mizona lo kamina. And we didn't learn all the laws of Birkat Hamazon. We don't know the answer to this question. And what this story shows us is something that I think we all know and we all experience. When we lose someone that's close to us, we realize that we didn't realize what we had. I've been to hundreds of houses of mourning, and it's a common, almost every place that I've gone, they say the same thing. We didn't realize about this person. We didn't know all the things he or she did. We didn't know how much this person meant to another person. And it's natural and it's normal. And what Rabbi Soloveitchik is saying is this brings a tremendous sense of guilt. When we lose someone that's close to us, we feel terrible that we didn't know the person, that we now got to know better as we sit and we mourn them. And therefore, what it's teaching us is that the avelut that we have is also wrapped into the concept of Tish'a BeAb. And therefore, when we sit in avelut, whether it be on the day of, on the week of, on the month of, on the year of, it's a very appropriate feeling for us to have to think about what are we going to do differently. This is why many of us take upon ourselves to say, what was this person about? Can I find some character trait, some mitzvah that this person stood for, something that they were about that I could carry with me in order to absolve myself in a good way of the guilt that I feel. I had more to go, but I see we're getting close to the next part of the program. So I just want to wrap up. We've done a quick tour of some of Rabbi Soloveitchik's thought on the concept of mourning. And what's very clear was that the rabbi understood that the halacha that we have, the practices that we have in our hands, that we've passed down for generations, whether it be through families or through education or through reading the books that we've been given, the halacha that we have shapes us. It shapes us in many ways. It teaches us how to act, but maybe much more importantly, how to think and how to feel. And that's kind of what we're experiencing now, says Rabbi Soloveitchik, as we come to the capstone of the 3 weeks. In the Gemara, there's a statement which says that there's 2 different types of avelut. There's avelut chadasha and avelut yeshana. Avelut chadasha is the feeling that we have when the avelut is new. Like we just said, a person passes away, and the halacha eases us slowly off it. But there's another type of avelut that's very, very important. It's called avelut yeshana, old avelut. And it's the avelut that we're all at the climax of right now. Over the last 3 weeks, beginning with the fast that happened 3 weeks ago today, we began to get a little shock to our system. And then slowly over the course of the 3 weeks, we adopted more and more until finally today, we're not learning Torah, we're not eating, we're full-fledged avelut today. And what Rabbi Soloveitchik points out is that just like avelut helps us have the right feelings when someone passes, avelut here is having us have the right feelings about what we need to feel as a people. You see, we live in a time and place where, for the most part, everything is wonderful. Jews are living a charmed life in the year 2019. Virtually anywhere you look, we're blessed. I know there's anti-Semitism, and there's Iran, and we're not free of problems. But pick any Jew at any time in history, and look at where we live, and almost anyone would change place with us. And what the 3 weeks, in particular, Tish'a BeAb teaches us, is that we can't forget the very essential part of what it means to be a Jew, is to understand that it's not all glory, and that it's not all fun, and it hasn't always been roses. And during these 3 weeks, especially during the 9 days, and even more on the week of, and even more on Tish'a BeAb, we have to live like we live on Pesach, with the experience of what it means to leave Mitzrayim, we also have to live, as the Pismon teaches us, as the View teaches us, to leave Yerushalayim. We hope that we don't ever have to really live that, but we have to know that that's been our national experience. Only when we appreciate that that's been our national experience can we truly be the best Jews that we are. So, as I wrap up, we're very thankful to Rabbi Soloveitchik for the lessons that he taught us. And I think that we understand the importance of the commitment to the laws that we have, the halachot that we have, in particular around the concept of Avelut, but also around this time of year, where it's very, very important for us to understand that an essential part of what it means to be Jewish is to know how to be sad, to know that things are not all perfect, and the things that have not always been always perfect, and that will shape who we are as people, as Jews, and allow us to have that much better a relationship with Hashem. Thank you very much.